This is AK Global, episode 5.2 with Ansel and Kent. Hello guys, this is the second part of episode 5, and Kent and I, we start by finishing our repo discussion, but then we take it to some conclusions, okay? And we talk all about different things, including U.S. Treasuries becoming toxic, the wealth effect of dollars and how that affects gold and Bitcoin, Bitcoin flipping gold, expat choices, investing in Russia, and then we end with population and demographics. So all in all, this is a wide-ranging show. It was very fun to record. It took me a while to edit it down and get it out to you, as you can see. But again, this is episode 5.2. If you could, share this around, rate us on iTunes with people that you know would be interested in this type of content. That would really help us out a lot. All right, let's jump into it. See you on the flip side.
I was reading an article, and apparently executives are quietly selling. They're trying to exit
their stock
positions.
Options,
they're selling, but they're obviously trying not to spook the market. Actually, I kind of wanted to get into that at the end. I was going to go through just some quick points regarding the aftermath of the repos, if that
go
works
for it,
for you. Yeah, and then we'll kind of touch on this at the end. So just wanted to point out just a couple. There's just a couple quick points. When it comes to the repo market, specifically within the context of what's happening, it was oversubscribed, meaning that the banks that needed the liquidity, there are more of them than there was liquidity available. And so that was one of the key points. Apparently that kind of reversed, and now it's undersubscribed. But again, we'll see how long that lasts. I just wanted to point out that there's two interesting things I saw here. There's just a quick thing I wanted to read here. So strategists who have spoken with Fed officials are expecting the central bank to unveil a 300 to 500 billion standing credit line to the market at its meeting next month. In the context when this is written, this would be sometime in October, in order to provide consistent liquidity and keep the market functioning. As well, the Federal Reserve's asset purchases likely will total 315 billion over the next 6 months as it seeks to stabilize overnight funding markets and contain the movements of its target interest rate, according to projections from Morgan Stanley. And then in addition to that, Merrill Lynch's projection was even larger. They estimate 400 billion within the same context as Morgan Stanley. So 315, 400 billion for over the next 6 months to stabilize the overnight funding markets. That's the projections from the big banks. And with that, we can move into kind of what we were talking about, which was,
where's this going?
Well, one of the things what's interesting is you've got all this going on, and then you mentioned it earlier, Bitcoin is, cascading down, and it's just like, it's I'm not saying that anything's necessarily going on, but it is fascinating that, Bitcoin was doing well in dollar terms. And all of a sudden there's just this huge reversal when all this chaos starts. Again, Bitcoin is a speculative asset. So there are weak hands in it. And when the legacy market spooks, you could see the same happen in Bitcoin. That is a possibility, but I don't know. I wanted to touch bases with you and see what you think about this kind of strange phenomenon.
Well, I've said for a few weeks now, at least, that Bitcoin will be hurt initially, because when you have a liquidity crisis, you're trying to sell illiquid assets for more liquid assets, right? You're trying to get as much liquidity as possible. And currently that's the dollar. I mean, Bitcoin would be great, but it's still a fraction of the size that it needs to be to facilitate people coming in and fleeing to the dollar. It's just not big enough to be a safe haven yet. And so when people are, let's say you're a high net worth individual and you're looking for liquidity, you're going to sell your stocks or your bonds or whatever, your portfolio, for dollars mostly. And if you have a little Bitcoin, let's say you were smart and you bought a little Bitcoin back in 2016 or 2017, whatever, 2018, you're going to sell your Bitcoin because it's more illiquid than the dollar. That's just a fact. So I think Bitcoin will initially be hit in a financial crisis. And that's why I'm not surprised by, this big fall actually happened during like a liquidity crisis that the repo market was having. I think as we have more of these things, Bitcoin will actually be hit again and again and again, but it'll bottom out and it'll continue up. And before you know it, you'll see headlines that say, oh, Bitcoin at 10,000. I thought it was dead. I heard the last I heard it dropped 40% or something. And so the smart money will be using those dollars that they are fleeing into liquidity. See, it's a step function. So first you flee into the dollar, then you have all these dollars. Well, what are you going to do? Well, Bitcoin's down. Let's buy some Bitcoin, right? So it's first Bitcoin goes down, then while people flee into the dollar, then they buy the Bitcoin when it's down, and they turn their dollars into more dollars. So that's kind of how I see the next 6 months playing out. Really, I think we're going to go further down with Bitcoin, but it's going to bottom out, and it's going to, before we know it, next year it's going to be passing all-time highs again. So. Yeah, I had one. Well, I don't know. I'll just say it, but I might cut it out. So, the comment about QE bought really bad assets, right? It bought the mortgage-backed securities off of the balance sheets of the banks.
So it bought a paper kingdom.
Yeah. They bought all these bad assets, and what they're going to have to do next time is they're going to actually have to buy treasuries, because eventually people will look at this 22 or 23 trillion in debt now that the US government has. That's going to be a bad asset. That's going to be a troubled asset, a toxic asset. And so it's crazy to think about, but the risk-free asset is going to be shit. And the Fed is going to have to buy all the treasuries.
It's going to zero. It is absolutely going to zero. It's at like it had that jump where it went where the 10-year, I think it was the 10-year almost went up to 2% again, but it just literally just cascaded back down. I think it's like under 1.6% again. Again, and going back, what'd you call it, a step? What was your exact term?
It's like a step function.
Yeah, step function.
Yeah,
I agree. I kind of agree. And even when I first got into Bitcoin, I kind of worried. There's a lot of speculation going on because of the money printing. I'm sure Bitcoin has benefited to some degree from that. But I think what's going to happen is kind of what you described. But there's going to be a rush to the dollar. But in order to prop up the financial system, they're going to have to devalue the dollar greatly, and that's going to be that's going to create the incentive that drives. I mean, gold has more marketability at this point just because of its history. And gold again is basically either at or near all-time highs in all these major currencies. And so Bitcoin's at this point is kind of the little brother. It's got some growing up to do, but I definitely think that there's going to be that transition into dollars, but then with the dollars devaluing and all the other global currencies, basically being dumped in the volcano, so to speak, there's going to be basically the two options. It's going to be gold or Bitcoin or both. And I think at that point, people are going to have to escape these fiat currencies and go into those assets because, like you said earlier, barter is just too difficult, especially on a global level. And in order to maintain any semblance of trade or supply chains or whatever, they're going to need some sort of medium of exchange. And there's a reason they don't use the bolivar. There's a reason they don't use the bolivar, because it's so volatile, and I think that's something we could see in a lot of different currencies. So that's really the kind of the final point that I had.
Yeah, so while you were talking there, I thought, hey, maybe this step function. I kind of would describe it like Bitcoin trails the dollar by about a year, or even 6 months to 12 months. So as the dollar gets stronger, that happens first, and then Bitcoin gets stronger because people, the wealth effect. It's the same with the wealth effect in Bitcoin. As Bitcoin goes up, actually people spend more value. So if I own one Bitcoin and it goes from $100 to $10,000, oh shit, I'm rich, bitch, and I can spend it, right? So that's the wealth effect. Well, if the dollars are going up, after a year or so of this happening, I think people look for places to put their dollars, and they're going to find Bitcoin. So I don't know. I would be interested to break that down on a long-term chart on the history of Bitcoin, especially over the last 5 years, and see if that's the case. When about 6 to 12 months after the dollar spikes, if Bitcoin spikes as well, that'd be interesting.
Well, it's the older people that are going to go into gold. Young people aren't going to go into anything because they don't pay attention. But when they're forced to pay attention, they're being digital natives. I definitely foresee them going into Bitcoin. This is a situation. Obviously, we're talking about a situation here where there's a gun to your head, basically. And so, with that being the case, and people having to make a choice, they're going to try to find the hardest asset. I don't know at what point Bitcoin, gold, where the flippening so forth, happens. I think it will. I don't know how close we are to that. Flipping gold is going to be a big deal. That's an $8 trillion market. I think the Bitcoin market right now is sitting around like 100 billion. I don't know what the market cap is. It's going to be a while. Bitcoin, was born during a financial crisis. Now we're going to see what happens, how it manages going through a financial crisis. The halving's also coming up too. So a lot of things to see, but I'm kind of with you on a short-term bearish outlook, just because I think that Bitcoin has benefited from some of the speculative frenzy that's gone on in the legacy markets. And when everything collapses, there's going to be a lot of scared hands that jump out of everything and into the dollar. Like you said, they're going to go to the most well-known liquid asset, if you will, out there. And so after that, though, once the Fed starts firing up, massive amounts of QE in coordination with all the other world central banks, once that gets rolling, once that is proven to be ineffective, that's when we're going to see, what Bitcoin's really made of, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think the dollar could get super strong and fuck everybody. Fuck the whole world.
Even though Trump doesn't want that, he keeps fighting that because of the whole export thing. But the rest of the world has to go somewhere.
Yeah,
so they're going to go to what they know.
Yeah, he can't stop it. I mean, the dollar is going to get very, very strong, and that is like kind of it's like, I don't know. I kind of view it as, in Austrian economics, you say, okay, all else equal, if the supply of a good goes down, then the price will go up, right? It's similar the way I look at the dollar, right? All else equal, the demand is going to go up. So the price is going to go up. And it doesn't matter.
Going to be more euros chasing less dollars, for example.
Yeah, everywhere, especially emerging markets. Like, I don't want to be, this is a tangent and we can probably cut this out, but I've been looking at like Ecuador, and a couple years ago I was really into moving to Mexico. I thought, I need to get out of the United States and all this. And over the last maybe 12 months, I've been, just for pleasure, going on YouTube and looking at people that moved to Ecuador or Costa Rica or places like that. And I think they're going to get smoked. I think if you wait like 2 or 3 years from right now, you will be able to get half off of everything in these emerging markets. It's going to be
Costa Rica is expensive now, from what I hear.
Yeah.
Apparently, there's a lot of big, significant problems. I was watching a macro thing with Raul Paul the other day.
Oh, really?
And apparently, there's like significant issues. Even Nicaragua, which is historically been a very stable country, like that, places like El Salvador and Honduras have like the highest homicide rates in the world. These places are train wrecks, and apparently Nicaragua is now having problems, and it basically is just creating a flood, or people are going into Costa Rica, similar to what you see with Venezuela, where people are going into Colombia, they're going into Ecuador. I think they're going down to Peru, and so they're overwhelming things in those countries.
Mm-hmm.
And so just if that's the case, I know in South America there's a resource strain because of what's going on. But if we see that in Central America too, I mean, yeah, that's going to implode, and eventually the smoke's going to have to clear, and then we'll see what's left. So since we're on the topic, I've got one more.
Okay, go.
Russia. Russia has de-dollared from what I've read.
Significantly, yeah.
Yeah, they've like extricated themselves. They don't have any government debt. They've completely reversed, like Soviet era policies were very anti-family. At least in the beginning, that was the whole thing, right? They want to create this. How some of those, it's like kibbutz or whatever that they created in Israel in I can't remember what it was, 40s, 50s.
The state is your family. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Where they tried to break these traditional biological bonds or whatever. So now Russia's reversed, and apparently the alcoholism problem has significantly improved. Like they've had a 40% or something reduction in alcoholism over the course of some time. Yeah, and it's still rough. You don't just recover overnight from something like the Soviet Union, but they're pushing Russian language, Russian culture. They've brought the Orthodox Church back. And I'm not, saying God exists or he doesn't. I'm just saying that these are unifying factor. Like Russia is rebuilding its identity quietly, and nobody's paying attention. And so to me, especially there's blood all over the streets, and so to speak, in an investing sense. I would be looking to put money in Russia really at any point here. Probably wait till after everything blows up, but that would be the quote-unquote emerging market. I don't really consider them an emerging market, but that would be the place where I look to park capital.
That's interesting that you say that. I don't know. I mean, I don't think there's a future in authoritarian regimes. Like everybody says, China's the future. China's the next 100 years. This is going to be a China-led or Eastern next 100 years. I don't think so. Even when the West collapses, it still has a better system for capitalism. And so I would just hold dollars, hold gold, hold Bitcoin until the bottom hits in the West, and then buy the shit out of the West. That's kind of like my idea. What do you think of that?
Yeah, ethnically, China has a very high intellect, high IQ population, which that helps them in some sense, but they also have this kind of groupthink, and this is deeply built into Chinese culture. This is something that's existed for thousands of years. You could argue that they're genetically people that have reproduced are the ones that have been obedient, and so that's produced obedient behaviors out of the Chinese ethnic group as a whole. But one of the things they're doing is by going into places like Bangladesh, I think it was Sri Lanka. This is just an example, and building a port. They lend money from Chinese banks to Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka takes the money and they build the port or whatever. Basically, the port's the collateral, and so when Sri Lanka defaults, which of course they do, China just goes in and takes it, and that's what they're doing all over all over Asia and into Africa, and so they're not doing the adventurism that the United States did in terms of just going in with boots on the ground. They're taking a better course than that, but at the same time, they are really pissing off a lot of these people in these countries because the people don't like Chinese people, and the Chinese people in turn don't like them because of just cultural differences, right? Pakistan and China, they're nothing alike. Yeah, they share a border, but they are nothing alike. They couldn't be further. So yes, China's doing work there, but let's just say they don't get along. It's not something that I view as overly sustainable. And see, now Russia's much more open than China, even though they have kind of a bit of an authoritarian thing. I mean, at the end of the day, they fund RT, love RT or hate RT. They're producing a lot of content that is they let a lot of different voices be heard on that. That would never be tolerated in China. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So Russia's historically been connected to the West and had,
Well, ever since Peter the Great, that he looked towards the West. He wanted to be a European power, and so I think like there's this almost psychological inferiority complex with Russia to the West, and they might not have that with China. And so I think when push comes to shove, they'll probably lean west. They'll probably lean towards the West. So that's good. And we'll see, man. If they can get some more free markets there, then I would be with you 100%. I think they could explode in productivity.
Yeah, I mean, again, and they're doing things that I view they're rebuilding their traditional cultural heritage, which has a tendency to unite people. And again, they're pushing family. That's is Putin doing it specifically? Could he be using it as a tactic? Perhaps, probably, whatever. But regardless, if he is using it as a tactic, I would much rather have that tactic being used on me than this disintegrative, tactic that's being pushed in the U.S. where they're basically trying to destroy the family. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So I just view that as a long-term positive. So while Russia isn't perfect, if you're talking, I guess, a pseudo-emerging market, I'm kind of a fan. But I wouldn't put any money in until after whatever's going to happen happens, because all markets are going to get cleared out no matter how insulated they are away from the problem.
Yeah, don't be holding any debt. I saw a interview from DiMartino Booth.
Mm-hmm. Danielle,
that's right. And she was talking about how, like, her portfolio right now, she has found some
municipal bonds.
Yeah, and
that's interesting.
Yeah, that's very interesting, because I would say no debt, man. Just get that debt off of your freaking portfolio. You have to. I mean, even though stocks are probably going to drop like maybe over 50% or something, bonds could go to zero, like, pretty fucking quick. So I don't know.
I looked into bond history. Bond defaults are like actually really rare. So they have happened, but we're talking like a couple times every century or something like that. Like it's really rare. For some reason they pay out. I don't know how, but
yeah, but you're looking at a once in a millennium type event here. That
no, I actually agree with that. I think we've reached the end of a cycle. I mean, we're down at the zero bound. The lower bound, as the Fed calls it, but we're at zero and negative rates. The only thing that they're just literally taking capital and throwing it in the fire. So we're going to have to reverse sometime around where we are now. They could take it more deeply negative, but that's going to be short lived. So,
well, hey, I got a question for you. Do you know Roy Seabag? But
yeah, I saw him on Max Kaiser.
Yeah, I think it was Max
Kaiser. I'm sorry, that last name kills me.
And he was talking about the gold. Yeah, he's talking about gold and the impending population thing. Did you?
Yeah, I'm not making fun of him. He's actually got interesting insights. I like listening to him. So
yeah, I think he's good, except he sucks with Bitcoin, and he's a gold bug, and so that is double whammy for him. But I think he's
not he does like Bitcoin though. He's not like a Peter Schiff.
Yeah, he's not a no coiner, but he
speaks. Yeah,
I mean, he's a smart dude, but he's running his business, gold business, so he's got he's biased. But anyway, the idea he had was that gold is and these negative rates are signaling a dramatic decrease in population, because since the Bronze Age, apparently, I mean, you can go back and look at records from ancient Sumeria and sort of interest rates and these things. In recorded history, we're at the lowest we've ever been. In recorded history, this has never happened. And looking at that, and he ties it in, I don't know exactly how he ties it in, but he ties it into like, we're going to have a population cut in half sort of thing, event where 50% of the world's population dies off.
Well, you have to. They're literally they're burning resources, meaning there are less resources to allocate towards. Let's just say the population is static. You're through negative interest rates, through NERP, you're burning assets. So you're literally taking things away from people so that they have less. So there's only going to be one thing that can happen, and that is some sort of. I mean, you're already seeing demographic decay in Europe, really worldwide, believe it or not.
Mm-hmm.
Even places like Brazil's birth rate has just been slammed to basically where the U.S. is, which is unheard of. They had really high birth rates decades ago. Africa, I think, is still amongst the highest, but they've gone down. And so
yeah, but what do you think about not talking about birth rates, but an actual event? So this is like a bubonic plague,
the Black Plague,
yeah, or maybe nuclear war or something that kills half the people.
Definitely, I know, like in Los Angeles, they keep talking about the disease that spread. Like people actually have contracted the bubonic plague in Los Angeles. One lady, I think she had to get something amputated because of it. Like you can treat it now, but it's still lethal if you don't. Yeah, that's the typhus is moving around, and then if you get more people in those tent cities, and again, if things
Ebola.
collapse. Yeah, I heard there's actually people aren't talking about. There's a big swine flu problem in Africa, so they're losing huge amounts of is it feedstock? Not feedstock.
In China too.
Stock.
Yeah, in China too, because they're a huge pork consuming country, or the largest, I guess. And a bunch of their pigs have, and then they had like some sort of reserves of pork. Did you hear that? It was like. I don't know how many pounds or kilos of pork, but they had these like frozen pigs in reserve, just like you would have some sort of other siloed grain. They actually like froze a bunch of these pigs or something, or preserved them. And so that was interesting. But
see, I don't know if people drop nukes. I think it would be more effective to be a little more traditional and do boots on the ground, because again, if starvation is the option, China can just basically, mobilize their gigantic population and send them into neighboring countries to extract resources. If you nuke those countries, then there's no resources to extract because you've destroyed the environment for the next, I don't know, 100 years or however long it takes for nuclear hit to clear itself. So you don't want to poison the well. It'd be easier to go in there some way and just take it outright, so you can actually use the land.
Yeah. Have you heard about this, some sort of mosquito thing? I'm trying to find it right now.
Yeah, I run into them at the track all the time. I am the mosquito thing. They like to bite me like there's no tomorrow. Bastards.
No, they did some like genetically modified mosquito, and I think it was in South America, but they released them because they were supposed to have some beneficial mutation. I don't know whether they died off after a certain period of time, or maybe they attacked other mosquitoes. I don't know exactly, but and they released these, and they were supposed to be all female or something like that. But like Jurassic Park, how nature finds a way, like somehow these fucking mosquitoes learned how to breed in the wild. And so they have all of these like super mosquitoes that are causing problems now. I'll have to find a link for you because I couldn't find it right now. But
I saw the headline. I did not look into it any deeper than that. So yeah. I know vaguely. Well, Chris Martenson, if you ever listen to him, they talk about apparently like the pollinators. Their population has been like cut in half or something globally.
Mm-hmm.
Like pollinators are dying off. So they're very important for the management for food to grow and all that stuff.
Oh yeah, our whole ecosystems and stuff.
Yeah, well, plants.
Can you see that the bees dying off and these super mosquitoes coming in, and like just like the human population just gets cut in half by killing off all these helpful insects? And
I mean, extinction events. Sorry, I tried to trump the computer, but extinction events, they happen. I mean, why did the bubonic plague spread? I mean, people are just in close, very close,
Yeah.
dingy, gross circumstances. So actually,
Fleas.
it's
Yeah.
living in these cities and so forth. If there is an outbreak, I don't want to get all doom and gloom, doom pornish, but
Let's do
at the end of the
it.
day, yeah, at the end of the day, I mean, it is something to be concerned with because these tent cities and stuff here in the U.S. are popping up. All these diseases are being spread in there. I mean, it's like there could be an outbreak. I don't know. I want to be away from that area, which is why I'm almost like maybe I should just stick around Omaha for a bit while longer and play it
Yeah.
safe.
Yeah. The Midwest, not a bad place in that respect.
Wisconsin or something. So
Yeah, you don't want to be in a big port city, that's for sure, or even a big tourist city like Orlando or LA, I guess, where you're going to have a lot of people flying in there. But anyway, okay, should we wrap this up? We wrapped about the repo stuff, and then we kind of took it into the next level.
yeah, there was definitely a tangent there where we went off on a tangent for quite a bit, and I was like,
Oh, it was
ooh,
great.